Welcome, everyone. I'm Sue Barber, author, former IT director for a Fortune 500 company, turned executive coach, and this is the Visibility Factor podcast, where we explore how to raise your visibility and play bigger at work and in life. We'll explore key topics and welcome guests that help you shift your thinking about yourself so you can see new possibilities for your leadership. I'm on a mission to create a visibility movement for leaders to show their value and be seen for their true talent. Are you ready to take the next step towards a higher level of visibility for yourself? Let's go. Today's episode of the Visibility Factor podcast is brought to you by Amplify You, the ultimate program designed to unleash your full potential and amplify your success. Imagine having a personal coach cheering you on, guiding you through a journey of self-discovery, and helping you break free from those limiting beliefs that have been holding you back. That's exactly what Amplify You is all about. Whether you're a leader now or aspiring to be one, this program is your ticket to a more confident, empowered you. It's like having a supportive friend in your corner, encouraging you to dream big. It's about having the career success that you want and creating a life you truly deserve. Amplify You offers a unique experience to help you build the confidence to tackle any challenge life throws your way. If you're interested in learning more about the program, please visit susanmbarber.com and click on the menu item Programs. Are you ready to transform your life and your career? Let's make it happen. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Visibility Factor podcast. This is Sue Barber, your host. I'm thrilled today to bring you my guest, Melissa O'Hara. She and I met recently in a mentoring group that we're both a part of, and she's doing some great things, and I just really wanted to bring her on the show and let her share some of that with you. She's also an executive coach. So thanks so much for joining today, Melissa. I'm excited for everybody to hear from you, and I'd love to have you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Sue, and I'm thrilled to be with you, and thanks for having me today. So as you had mentioned, I'm not just an executive coach and a facilitator, but I consider myself a business person first. So I spent over 30 years in the business. I actually spent the last decade at a Fortune 50 company in more of an HR function. So I was doing leadership offsites, retreats, working with executives, teaching leadership and professional development courses, that type of stuff. And yet I felt like there was more. And so that led me, after having a really successful career in corporate, to figure out what was next for me. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. How did I come to that kind of insight and conclusion? What did I do with that information? And how did I quit my job after 30 years and start my own company and have never looked back once?
That's so amazing. And I'm so excited for everybody to hear what she's doing. It's really cool stuff. So I'm really thrilled to get into that. But before we do, I'd love to go back to your corporate experience because so many of the listeners come from a corporate background or in corporate still. What was it? Was there some situation that happened for you, or was it just this, I know you said there's something more out there, but was there something specific that happened that really made you start to question?
There were two major pivots in my career. The first one was, and I'll go back kind of seasonally, when my kids were in middle school. And I was in finance and I was good at what I did. I was managing $500 million of expenses. I was speaking the language of business. I was good at what I did, but there was something that was missing. And so one of the things I did, and I actually use this tool with my clients now, is something that's called energy tracking. So what I did was I just started a Word document and I wrote down the things that was bringing me energy, things that were neutral, and things that were dragging my energy. And what I noticed is having conversations, coaching people, doing lunch and learns were in that high energy thing. And actually doing financial reports, quarterly reporting, listening to earnings calls were in the draining my energy. And that was a little bit of a, if I'm going to be in finance, wouldn't I want that to be? So it was a really good insight. And so that was the first step of really being honest with myself, not what others would expect of me, or you should, and finance is such a prestigious type of position, but really being honest about what that was. And so it was paying attention to really what was important to me, not what other people thought. That was kind of one of the drivers. Then the second driver, which was that second big pivot, deciding to leave the company, it really was, I spent 30 years, I'll say, in a corporate box. It looked very similar. I was working with the same people and it was in the same geography. And I just felt like there was something out there. And once I felt like I could move, I felt like if I waited, I would just be prolonging it. So could I have waited until retirement? Absolutely. My job was good. I had great colleagues. I got paid well. I could have very easily just said, I'm just going to wait till retirement and then I'll do this second act kind of thing, which I know for many of people that I talk with are thinking about what's the next act or I don't feel like retiring, but I want to get off the corporate wheel. For me, I was like, if I know that's going to happen, I want to do that while I still have energy, while I'm still young enough, while I can still kind of take that risk, as opposed to waiting until I'm in my mid 60s and then starting the next thing. So those were the two biggest things that were clues that allowed me to say, I think I might want to do something differently.
Yeah, I love that. So what was that like? I remember my first day after leaving Kraft, I thought this is so bizarre to not have a million meetings and not have a bunch of things to do. How was that for you?
Yeah, well, timing is everything, right? So I resigned in February of 2020. I left in March of 2020. In fact, my last day at work was the day that everything closed down. I had also put my house on the market, moved to a different geography, and then COVID hit all within 60 days. And so it was very unsettling in some ways. And yet, in hindsight, it opened up more possibilities. So I'm doing more international work than I think I ever would have done, because the barrier of being geographically close to do work with someone was pretty much eliminated. And so the other thing I'll say about that, Sue, is, like you said, that first day, it was kind of unsettling when you left Kraft and you're like, okay, now what? Now what do I do? It'll go into actually some of the framework that I'll talk about. The things that I had biggest question marks around, like, will I like working from home full time? Now, remember, this was pre-COVID. So, I went to an office every day for 30 years. I had a question mark on, is that something I would really like to do? And what I say in my process is we move from question marks to exclamation points. So my question was, would I want to sit at home and do work in this chair, in this office with the kitchen right there? Like, is that actually a thing that I want to do? Working from home, would it really suck me in and I'd have a hard time distancing myself from work? So I deliberately ran experiments before I decided to leave to see what that would feel like, to actually explore that and to get a taste of it, so that when I made the decision, it felt a little bit more comfortable and like, yes, I feel comfortable doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did the same. I was doing stuff at night. I was coaching people at night just to see if I liked it, if I thought it was going to be a good career at some point for me. I just wasn't prepared to accelerate that plan, but I had to anyway. And I think it was really a good thing to do. And I would always, I don't know, if anyone asked me for advice, I would always share that it's a good thing to do, because to your point, like, you don't know if it's going to be something you enjoy. You may want to return to an office full time, and that's, not necessarily how this is going to work. So I love that you did that. What was some of the key insights you had for yourself when you did that experiment for yourself?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I had to unlearn from corporate. This is one of the things I had to unlearn. In corporate, especially in corporate, you don't share with anyone, particularly outside of your organization, whether it's information, sometimes there's best practice sharing depending on, where you are. But for the most part, you don't share anything. One of my biggest insights was when I asked people, so I wanted to go into kind of a coaching and consulting world, what do people make? I would feel very uncomfortable asking someone that. And yet what I found when I asked for help, which is something I had to learn personally, and when I asked maybe the uncomfortable question, everyone was willing to help me. They were so willing to share, hey, let me give you a framework. Let me give you some slides. Here's some information you can use. Here's a sample contract that I use with my clients. When I asked for stuff like that, people were so willing. And now I'm on the other side of it. So when someone is early and looking at going on their own, I'm like, how can I help you on your journey? What can I share with you about being an entrepreneur, about setting up a company, about, starting from scratch, and how do you actually run the business? Because it is a business that we're still running. How do we run this as a business, which is very different than a Fortune 50 company? And those are the things that I was grateful to receive once I got comfortable asking for it. And I am really willing always to share that willingly with other people to help them on their journey.
I found the same. And it was really a little odd, right? I was like, wow, you're just going to tell me information. And just the support, I think, is very different for to your point about how people are willing to help, share resources, spend time on the phone with you, answering whatever questions that you have. That just wasn't the same. And I think there was always that concern of, oh, are they going to use this against me? Are they going to see me as weak? Are they going to, all of those things that we grew up with for so many years that were challenging. So I know you have an incredible framework that you built and are really using with clients. How did you start down that path of thinking about something like this?
Yeah. So what I do is I take a very creative problem-solving technique. It's called design thinking. And I use it to help people literally design the life they want to lead. It started actually with my work in corporate. So I actually had the opportunity to do some design thinking work, launching new products and services at the organization that I was with. And so that was helpful because I got a practical hands-on, and I'm a hands-on learner. So I got to use it, got to use the techniques, and it was really amazing. So one of the things around design thinking is you fall in love with the problem instead of falling in love with the solution. So for most people, they're like, I think I have the answer. And then even in corporate, you'd have a beta test. But if that failed, you pretty much were in trouble because you already had bet the farm on this was going to be the solution moving forward, right? So what we do in design thinking is we fall in love with the problem. And for many people, the problem is, how do I use my unique gifts and talents in an authentic way and feel really fulfilled, rewarded, financially as well as, inside? And what does that look like? And how do I get there? And for many people, it's like deers in the headlight when they come up with that, I don't know what I should do. I don't know what I should be. And over the years, and that was the same thing for me. I knew what 20-something Melissa liked to do, but not what 50-something Melissa wanted to do. And so now using this creative technique that says, okay, what are my gifts and talents? And how do I unapologetically look at my superpowers instead of my weaknesses? Because what I'll say is in corporate, often your development plan, with air quotes, right, is on the soft side, on the things you're not doing well. And for years and years, you're working on, okay, what do you need to work on? What do you need to develop? What do you need to improve? Instead of having people focus on their strengths, their superpowers, their real gifts and talents, and elevating those to a level where they feel like they are performing at their best very easily. And so I think that's one of the shifts that I learned through the process is how do you focus on that? And then creating a framework that allows people to have enough structure to so they're not deer in headlights anymore, that they can actually take action, but also do it in kind of an organic and iterative way, as opposed to a project plan. I do this, and then an answer pops out. So that's kind of high level how I got into it. And then from all of my practice, I started creating my own framework. What have I learned through 30 years of business, a decade in HR, doing leadership coaching, doing design thinking and teaching design thinking? How did I put all that together into something that I thought would really work? And then testing it with people, refining it and to a point where they're like, this is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I love that because anybody who comes to me too, it feels overwhelming, right? There's so many choices out there now. I think back when I was in college, we didn't have, internet, showing my age a bit, but I think we look to the people around us. What did they do? What kind of jobs did they have? Or what were we, socially or culturally told we should do? And I think this is a whole new world for people, right? There's so many options. You can do this, you can do that, you can travel, you can be online, you can do all these different things that were even possible before. So I love that you have a structure that people can, with your help, walk through and be able to do. Can you share a little bit about how you go through that process with them?
Sure. So there's 5 key elements in what I call the Horizon Life Design process. And I call it Horizon Life Design because imagine like the old sailors when they saw the horizon and you just thought it was a cliff and you'd fall off of it. Remember? Right? Well, I still feel that way. Like sometimes I'm standing at the beach and I look at the horizon and you can't see past it, but there's so much more there. And I think it's similar for ourselves. Even though we can't see past that horizon line, there's a lot that's past there. And through this process, I help people figure it out. So there's 5 elements to it. The first one is reflect. And that's really reflecting on who are you and what's important to you. For some of my clients, they do that regularly. They might reflect. But for many of them, they feel like they've been kind of a mouse on a wheel. They got to this point in their career. It wasn't by design. It was just by accident. And they don't even know if they really wanted to be here. And so taking time, I always say you had to slow down to speed up. So the reflect step of it is to reflect on what's important to you. And there's a variety of exercises that I work with my clients and have them to really understand what is their true north. What is the important things for them? How, I'll call them their design criteria. What are the must-haves in their life as they move forward? So that's the first piece. The second one is to identify. And that's where they identify their own point of view on what's important to them, not from other people, but from themselves. And I'll give you one of the exercises that I do in this step of the process. It's called assumption busting. And what we do is we have people write down all of the assumptions they have about their self, their life, their work, whatever it might be. Then we have them flip it into a positive. But it has to have 2 things, Sue. Not only does it have to be positive, but you have to believe that it's true. Mm-hmm. So I was working with one client, and so her kind of limiting belief, we could call it a limiting belief, was that making mistakes is bad. She had been brought up to say making mistakes is a bad thing. And she said to me, all right, Melissa, I could say making mistakes is good and you can learn from them. But she says, I really don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. So we worked together to say, okay, what is a positive reframe of that? And what she came up with is making mistakes is human. And if I am kinder and gentler with myself, I will be able to get over it more quickly. Mm-hmm. And so by identifying the things that are holding people back, it allows them to unlock some things that might be preventing them from taking action. So reflect and then identify. The third step is imagine. This is where we use really creative brainstorming and lots of different techniques to imagine multiple possibilities of their future. And I think this is one thing that differentiates from traditional project planning or traditional approaches. It's not, I want to be a project manager, a photographer, a doctor. You don't come up with one path forward. You come up with, based off of your gifts and talents, which we've kind of cultivated through the first part, what are many different ways you could play them out in the world? So for me, everything from college professor to entrepreneur to more corporate and more traditional role were all things that were on the list. But we also push it a little bit further. One of them is, I call it no limits. And that no limits version is if no one would laugh at you and money was no object. So for that version of me, I was a stand-up comedian. And so I don't know why, but it was just like something that came up and it was funny. And it was like, I want to explore that. It's not based off of what other people would think. I'll be like, I think there's something there. Now, after you've imagined multiple possibilities going forward, you move into the fourth part, which is explore. You start to explore what those things might be. And what we have you do is design very deliberate, specific experiments so that you can try it before you buy it. So I'm not going to quit my job, become a stand-up comedian, obviously, but there was something there that I wanted to explore a little bit more. So what I did for one of my experiments was I took a 6-week improv class with my youngest, Suzanne, and the two of us did improv that culminated on the stage at the Connecticut Theater. So we actually did an improv performance in front of a live studio audience. And what I love about the experimentation part is, like I said earlier, we go from question marks. What questions do I have? There's something around this that I really want to explore a little bit more, to an exclamation point. So what I learned is I didn't have to experiment am I okay on stage? Because I've done main stage work with lavaliers and stuff like that. That wasn't an experiment. For some people, it might be. Do I want to be up on stage in front of people? That could be a question and a way to solve for it in a real low risk way, right? But there was something around, I don't like to be funny on demand, but I do like telling stories. In fact, many people tell me one of the things that makes you a really good coach, Melissa, is the stories that are real that I can relate to. And so that's what I learned. Like, what about that was something that I wanted to explore a little bit more. So after the exploration stage, and this is the fifth piece of it, which is choose. And it's not necessarily at the end, but it's about making choices. It's about feeling empowered about the choices that you are making. It's taking agency. So instead of feeling like you're a victim of the world around you, you are now taking ownership and driving. This is what my gifts are. This is how I want to show up, and feel like you can take really bold action. So for me, bold action was the day that I walked in and wrote my resignation letter with not one client, but knowing I was going to take a bet on me because I know my work ethic. I know what I can do. And that was just, I felt so emboldened by that choice. There was no looking back.
I love that whole framework. It's very easy to follow. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more to it, right? You gave us the high level, but it's very easy to understand and follow. Can you share any examples of where someone might have started and how they ended up after going through that work with you?
Yeah, sure. So there's lots of different examples. I'll give you an example of one woman I was working with. She was a corporate attorney. And she was doing corporate work, and it was really trying to decide what was next. And I'll go back to the assumption busting. So one of the assumptions that she woke up, was raised in a very religious household, and it was money was the root of all evil. Like, that was how she was raised. And she had a real tension between, as an attorney, you get paid fairly well, and money is the root of all evil. And so she really had to wrestle with those things to say, what do I want to do with that, and how do I reframe it? And so the reframe for her, philanthropy was very important to her. And her reframe was, if I make more money, I can be more philanthropic, and I can choose where and how I give my money back in order to be in service of others. As soon as she did that, everything changed. Right? Because then the guilt that had maybe been carried with her about being an attorney and making money that's more than other people now was a way for her to actually serve one of her important values, which is around philanthropy, and everything changed. And she told me a funny story where her experiment was she just started putting money away every month in a little account, right? And she met an utter stranger who wanted to improve her health and fitness, and she bought that woman an exercise bike.
Wow.
And she says, I never felt better. Like, I had the money there. I just, coincidentally met this woman and was able to change her life because it was something that she wanted to do but couldn't afford. And that she was able to then give her that. And so now her whole life is a series of kind of philanthropic endeavors that just feels very different than it had in the past.
It's like, just understanding your why and what's really important to you, and really focusing on that versus focusing on maybe some of these old beliefs that you're holding on to. Wow, that's so powerful. I bet that woman was shocked when she said, I'm going to buy you this exercise bike.
Right? Just like, no, you can't do it. Really? And, it's those types of things. I had one woman that I was working with, and she had been through a divorce and through, different life stages for herself personally, a very senior woman from a corporate perspective. But she came through the whole process. And what I love about it is there's not just one particular outcome, but what she said is, she says, I really feel like I felt like a victim of my own life up until doing this work with you. And now she feels like I am in the driver's seat. She says, just that change, that transformation of my mindset going through this has opened up everything. And so any challenges that she has dealing with her ex-husband, it's part of life. It just is, right? Now it feels like she can own that as opposed to having it influence her in a negative way. She now feels much more positive about where she's going.
So it sounds like you work with different types of clients. Are you focused on one type of client more than others?
Yeah, so as a coach, you're always like, I can work with anyone. But I will say the people that I work with the most are women, right? They're women who want to get more out of their life. And it could be maybe mid-career. I've got a lot of mid-career women who do feel like I'm just keeping the balls moving and I'm afraid I'm going to drop something. Like my best day is when I don't forget to pick up a kid at school. And that's not your best day, right? You can do better than that. And so helping them design what's new. For some, they stay within their existing organization, but they change some things about it. Some stay in their existing organization, but change departments or roles. And then there are some who have that I need to leave here in order to really be at my best and feel like they have the opportunity to do that. The second category of women that I typically work with, I'll say, are the pre-retirement. So they see this cliff. They maybe are working even longer than they want to. So they're ready to leave, but they don't know what's next. So they just stick around at a lackluster job or career because they don't know what's happening afterwards. By designing that. So I worked with one woman who wanted to do homesteading. She wanted to find a perfect property somewhere in the United States. And that was her, like, she came up with the answer. I need to find a property, need to buy it, need to homestead. That was her answer. Through the work that we did together, she was able to take a property that she has, get some chickens, actually start gardening on it. And she was able to make her current life the life that she desired, but she didn't even see that as an option. And so that's really the fun thing of having people feel excited about this next season as opposed to worried, fearful, stressful, or just afraid of boredom. Like they're not ready to stop, but they're ready to stop what they've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years.
The power of fear, right? Just holds you back and keeps you small. And I love that you're helping them through, I would say, clarity and possibilities. There's like two words that are jumping out to me as you're talking about this. And it's interesting because I work with a lot of possibilities as well. And people just have never considered some of the things that come out during our conversations as even something that they could consider doing. So I don't know if that's because of limiting beliefs or, just that they had no idea that was even possible for them, all of those things. So when you talk about some of these ideas or even things that you've done, like where you're improv, what are their first responses to some of these discussions that you have around different ideas that they could pursue?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the one I get the biggest pushback on. And that is one of the activities. It's called Gifts and Talents. It is about what are your superpowers? And here's what I ask my clients to do. Put together a list of kind of a concentric ring of loved ones, friends, family, coworkers, people who know you pretty well. And you're going to go out to them and you're going to ask them, what do you think my superpowers, my strengths are? Now, you're not going to do it like you had done for corporate, which is like, what do I need to work on in the next upcoming year? Or how is my performance? Like, it's not a performance review in any way, shape, or form. It's like, you know me well. I would love, what do you see in me that might be unique or special? And almost to a person, they're like, oh, Melissa, I can't do that. Oh, that feels so uncomfortable. And it does feel uncomfortable. And yet I'll tell you, I had one woman who, kind of reluctantly did it. And people give you feedback in all different forms. Some want to do it live. Some will send a text, an email. Some will be bullet points. Some will be paragraphs. But you start to see themes that come and be like, oh, wait, I need to pay attention to that. So even for myself, somebody said to me, you take really complex things, Melissa, make it simple and easy to understand. And I said, okay, but all right, what are my gifts? Like, tell me something special. She's like, you don't realize not everybody can do that. And I think sometimes we know ourselves, but don't see what's special about that. We're almost too close to it. So this one woman did all that. She processed it all. And she said to me, and this was in tears, she said, when I have a bad day, I pull out that list and I read it.
Wow. That's powerful.
And so now that was not just at that moment or helping her design, but it was bringing her joy over and over again. When she was having a tough day, she would just pull it out. She would look at it.
Oh man, that's so cool though. I do something similar. And what's always interesting to me is the same fear that you just talked about comes up. Like, I can't ask them that. I'll say, just blame it on me. Say you're working with a coach and your coach is asking you to do this, which, helps them get through that first part of it. But what's interesting is the surprise that they have by seeing what people really think of them. We never ask friends and family, what do you think of me? What do you think I'm good at? We just don't talk about that. And the assumption is that they already know the answers. And when they get the answers, they are just shocked at the things that come back that they had no idea that people thought about them. So it's so powerful. And I love that she goes back and refers to it, because we all need that little file of things that we go back and refer to when we are having not a great day.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
So I'm curious, how has this design framework coming together for you? How has that shifted in the way that you see your business, in the way that you see yourself as a coach?
So for me, the experimentation mindset has changed everything. And what's cool now is I just weave it into everything that I'm doing. Anything that I have a question mark about. So for example, I just went on a trip. And it was 10 days. And that trip was very different. Like, I came home really exhausted from it, where other trips I've come back energized or refreshed from. And so because of the experimentation mindset, I was really curious. So that's one of the design thinking mindsets. It's curiosity, not judgment. And I was really curious about what were the elements of this particular trip that was different than other ones. And so I was able to very clearly see, compare and contrast, what was different about this vacation than other ones, and what about that do I want to learn from? So either in a future vacation, I can work and refine it, or I can work them into even work trips. And so those are the types of things that are really, really helpful. So now I take anything that I'm doing. So for example, I'm actually running a couple of corporate retreats in August. I will write down, what questions do I have around facilitation, interaction, location, whatever it might be, that I still have questions about, that I'm not sure of about my business or about my practice. And I will use that experience to answer those questions. So that's how I weave it into everything I do about the business, everything that I do about me personally. And that intersection between Melissa the person and Melissa the business leader feels so good and so kind of comfortably joined right now, as opposed to before, where I felt like I was the work person or the home person. Now I feel like, kind of from a yin yang perspective, they really are balanced.
It's just part of your DNA now. It just feels like it's just part of who you are.
Yeah, it is.
It's so simple too, right? I think anybody who's listening, you can all take this opportunity to ask yourself, what questions do I have about something? And I'm sure we just don't take the time to do that. We just keep going and we'll figure it out later. But taking the time to do that, I love the slow down to speed up too, because I think that is so unused in the world. Today, we're all so busy. We just keep doing things and doing things. And if you actually slow down and plan and have a conversation, even with yourself, you might discover some new answers that you had no idea existed for you.
Yeah. And one of the things around the question marks, I always say, not all questions are equal. So what I find for a lot of people is they go after the little questions instead of the big questions. And what I talk about, and many people have heard this analogy before, but imagine you had a clear glass container here. You had three piles. You had rocks, you had pebbles, and you had sand, right? Well, if you put the sand in first, the little things, then the pebbles, and then the rocks don't all fit in the container. But if you start with the rocks first, then put the pebbles in, shake, 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 then put the sand in, shake, 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 it all fits. And so when I talk about questions, what are the rocks? What are the biggest questions? So I had one woman was thinking about, do I want to move to a different geography? That was one of before she started thinking about some career things, she had to answer, did she want to stay or did she want to move? And that was going to then start to inform other future choices that would come from it. But what I find is some people get caught in the little tiny questions, and then they're just almost energetically exhausted because they keep working on the little stuff, as opposed to, what are your biggest questions? What are the big questions that you have about your life, your work, your relationships, whatever it might be. And how do you answer those first? By designing experiments, testing things out. Then that really frees you up to take action.
Mm-hmm. I think the energy piece and looking at the questions, I'm so glad you added to that, because most people will ignore the hard questions because they're hard, right? They take more energy to answer. But to your point about like whether she could move or not, she needed to answer that in order to make the other decisions. So
right.
It's almost like a critical path. Like, what's the critical path question you need to answer for yourself in order to make the next step work, right? You can head down the wrong path potentially for you if you don't answer that hard question.
Exactly.
Love that. Oh, love that. Anything else you want to share about what you're doing or your Horizon Design programs that you're working on?
Yeah, so it's fun to see where it was and where it is now. And so the program is available for one-to-one coaching. So if people want to get one-to-one coaching, also I train other coaches. So some coaches want to have a framework that is tested, proven, and this is a really great way in a box for people who are coaches and want to have something that they can bring and serve their clients with as well. And I also do run workshops. So there is one coming up in Hartford, Connecticut. It's on October 26th. It's at the Connecticut Science Center because we have to have it in a fun location because we are talking about kind of a scientific method a little bit on some of this stuff. And just having the opportunity to, if there's any of your listeners who have a question about like what's next and they want to reach out to me, I'm sure in the show notes you'll have how to reach out to me. Just let me know. I mean, I feel like part of my role is to make a positive impact in the lives of other people. And that's, really what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we will absolutely have her information. Is LinkedIn one of the top ways, though, that people connect with you today?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, we will absolutely have that in there because I hope you've gotten just a glimpse of the brilliance of this woman. And I wish you could see the video right now. You can see it later. But when you watch her talk about what she does, she just lights up. Her whole energy just jumps off the screen at me. So I love that you're feeling that way. And it just means that you've kind of found your true purpose in life of what you want to do and how you can help people, which is something that not everybody has. So I think that's amazing for you.
Well, I'm so thrilled to be with you here today, Sue. And, this podcast is just absolutely amazing. The fact that your book, The Visibility Factor, bringing visibility to people, and how you've now launched this podcast to really help share and bring access to people that people might not have a chance to meet or know. And I think it's fantastic you're doing this work.
All right. Well, we're going to transition into the 4 questions that I ask everyone, the Rise Up and Be Visible quick tips.
Okay.
And I'm excited to hear your answers. So the first question, what do you think visibility is and why did you answer that way?
Visibility to me is being your authentic self. So as I said earlier, not what other people expect of you, but that authentic way and showing up as the true you, not what other people expect you to be.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do to get visibility for yourself?
I don't worry about, I can't say always, but I try not to worry about what others think of me as often as I probably have been in the past. I use my own compass to drive decisions as opposed to expectations of others.
Yeah, so powerful to do that because we kind of grow up with that. I'm trying to please everybody and make everybody approve of us, right? Whatever our decisions are. That's so good. What is the best leadership and career advice you've received? The one woman who I had worked with in the past, and she was about how do I show up as me? And she was the one who kind of fostered that a little bit. That and knowing that she was comfortable as my boss, asking me to show up a little bit more as my authentic self, that was one of the tips that was extremely helpful. Did she give you any guidance as to how to do that?
Well, it's, I think because, remember I said there was work Melissa and home Melissa?
Right.
Because I had a friendship with her, she would see the difference between the two.
Oh.
And so she would be like, how does a little bit more of this show up? Right. I even joked about my corporate voice. My corporate voice was different than my, you know what I mean? And because she knew me on both, she could kind of help me or even give me permission, which I didn't need, but I did at the time to show up a little bit more as me. Playful, interesting, silly,
Yeah, I think we have this persona we think we have to be at work versus outside of work, and integrating the two into one person where you just have the energy that you have and you don't have to shift back and forth just makes such a difference for sure.
Exactly.
And then what is a book you would recommend to the audience?
It's funny. So I am not a huge book reader because I don't know. I do so much for my corporate work or for my business. But the one book that I do read, and actually this is one of the trainings that I have, is Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine. And so it is around how do you deal with life's challenges in a positive instead of a negative mindset. And so that book and then the training and coaching that I've been through really helped me understand how do I show up differently? How do I deal with negative things in my life and kind of quiet them a little bit more and really tap into the sage part of myself? And so that particular book and some of the training that goes with it is phenomenal to help people who are feeling stuck in negativity around them in their world, and real practical neuroscience ways to break out of it.
Yeah, so powerful. Those were big moments when I recognized some of those things that I was holding on to negatively and how to shift them. You're like rewiring your brain a bit, but it changes everything for you once you start doing that. So I love that. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing all the wisdom with everyone. I know that they're going to learn a lot. And I learned a ton. I hadn't been through a lot of design thinking conversations. And I feel like it's so straightforward the way you describe it and so simple. And I know it's not, but I know that the way you make it feel it just feels like a great process for people to go through. And I hope anyone in the audience who's interested will reach out to Melissa, have a conversation with her, and see if it's something that you want to do with her. Thank you so much for being here, Melissa. It's great.
Thanks, Sue. It was great.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining today on the Visibility Factor podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks so much for listening to the Visibility Factor podcast. Remember that visibility starts with small steps that are intentional and consistent each day. Be bold, be visible, be the leader you were meant to be. Find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, which are highlighted in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Visibility Factor podcast.